Okay, hello everybody. We will now be talking about plot structures, unveiling plot structures, a guide to storytelling, which is one of our topics, important topics when we are trying to write a short story. And it is not just on writing a short story that we're going to need plot structures or the structures when we are storytelling, but also when we are trying to express our views in the posts, and we're going to try to have the style of narration and storytelling when we are trying to make a point. So let us all start with reviewing what a plot structure is. So, what is a plot structure? A plot structure is a sequence of events in a story. Yes, we know this when we were in grade school. It is designed to engage the audience, it conveys a specific message, it creates a suspense, and guides the viewer or reader through a narrative. And it is very important that we know what plot structure is and how it is used in order to navigate the storytelling of a writer or an author or a content creator for that matter. Okay, so when we decide to write our story, it is important that we have a background and we experimented on different kinds of structures in plot. So the first one and the most famous is the classic one, which is the Freytag's pyramid. I know that we followed this when we were in college, when we were in high school, until we reached college. We have followed this pyramid, this diagram, and we have assigned different kinds of exposition and different sequence of events that happen in the story in each part of the Freytag's pyramid. And let's just review a little bit. And today we are gonna change that. We are going to talk about different kinds of plot structures, not only the Freytag pyramid. So, yes, let's review. The first thing that we remember is the exposition, followed by the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. So, it has five major events that we look for in a narrative or in a story. So the exposition is where the setting of the scene and the introduction of the characters happen. Example, in Pride and Prejudice, the novel by Jane Austen, in the first chapters, the author introduced the Bennet family, the parents, the members, where they lived, their quirks, what they do every day. Yes, even the things that they drink, the teas, the schedules, everything. Next to that is the rising action, where the tension and the conflict are built. Example, when Darcy and Elizabeth met, and Elizabeth felt an incredible disdain for Darcy. It's a negative feeling for Darcy. So they started really negatively in that story. And next to that is the climax. Well, the peak of the conflict. It's where Darcy proposed to Elizabeth, but Elizabeth rejected Darcy's proposal. And next to that is the falling action, wherein the events led to the resolution. Example of this was when Darcy changed his behavior and saw Elizabeth in another light, that Elizabeth was intelligent, Elizabeth was a comely individual who is free-spirited and a very intellectual one. And Elizabeth also did a little bit of a self-reflection during this time, yeah, after their conflict. And of course, the last one was the resolution, wherein the two of them resolved their conflict and tied their loose ends. And yes, they planned their marriage, Elizabeth and Darcy. So this is the Freytag's pyramid, to put it in a diagram. So we have exposition, and after the exposition, there were inciting incidents that led to the rising action, and the rising action led to the climax led to the falling action, and the falling action led to the resolution. So there's kind of a piece, no, that happened with the all the characters and the story. The Freytag's pyramid is actually good for focused dramatic stories, and this is also uh helpful when the story is decided to have a twist. For example, The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, which my students are very familiar and I would like you to read as well. Next to that is we have the three act structures. So it's a little bit of a um what do you call this, more sophisticated than the other one, than the Freytag's pyramid, because this is focused more on the different events that led to different climaxes. So each act has its own climax. So if we're going to look at the details of the three act structure, let's focus first on Act One, which is the setting up of the story. So it is the beginning of the story wherein the events, yes, there's exposition and then there's inciting incident that's gonna shape the plot. And then the second thoughts of the protagonist will happen there. And until the protagonist will be pushed to go to the climax of Act One. So, to put it in detail, the setup introduces the world, the characters, and the inciting incident that kicks things off. And it ends with a choice or event that locks the protagonist into what we call the point of no return. Yes. And then we move to the midpoint wherein the big twist happens. So if we're going to look at the diagram, there's ascending action. So the events that are happening are even more complicated and sophisticated, and the characters who are involved there are even more developed. They're the parts of them that are going to help the protagonist and the antagonist be shaped will be seen here. So in Act Two, that's the confrontation act. So the meat of the story, which involves the rising stakes, obstacles, and complications, happen. So often, uh, this part here has a midpoint twist that shifts the direction of the story, and it often ends with a low point or a crisis. So we can see here there's an obstacle. There are two obstacles, more or less, that led to the ascending action or the sophisticated ascending action, and that created those obstacles create the big twist, and then after the big twist, an obstacle happen, a disaster will happen until such time that the protagonist will reach a crisis and will be at a point of crisis. That's the end of Act Two, or the confrontation stage. Next will be the Act Three. So the Act Three happens when uh at the start of the climax of Act Two, the climax of Act Three happens, the descending action, yes, the descending events will happen until such time that there is a wrap up and there's a resolution, which is, well, the whole of Act Three. So the Act Three is the resolution part, and it is the climax where the main conflict peaks, followed by a fallout and tying up of loose ends. So the climax of Act Two meet uh meets with the climax of Act Three until such time that they find a descending events, yes, that lead to the resolution. An example of that here is in Disney's The Lion King, uh, as specifically portrayed by Simba's exile, which is the Act One. The second act is focused on the struggles, and then the third act is focused on the return of Simba to the pride. So the three act structure is best for straightforward, and satisfying arcs. So this is very predictable, and this is often used in our movies nowadays. The third one, we have the five act structure. So instead of three acts, we have five acts now. So the first act is the exposition, wherein it is also called the setting up and the hooking of the audience and the readers. The second act is the rising action, wherein the tension is built here, leading to the third act, which comprises the climax or the peak conflict. And after that, there's the fourth act or the events, the falling events or the falling action or the consequences of the climax. And last is Act 5, the resolution or the wrap up of what happens in the story. So an example of here of the five act structure is the Shakespeare's plays like the Hamlet, and it is best for epic or dramatic tales with room to breathe. Okay, so if we are confused with the Freytag's pyramid or the five act structure, let us focus our comparison on contrast on their origin and the flexibility so we will not be confused. So the Freytag's pyramid was based on Freytag's study of classical Greek and Shakespearean drama. On the other hand, the five-act structure traces back to ancient dramatic traditions and was standardized in Western theater, particularly during the Elizabethan era. And in terms of flexibility, Freytag is less rigid in terms of acts and more about the flow of dramatic tension. So it's not more detailed. The Freytag pyramid does not demand the details of events that happen in the story, wherein in how the resolution was met. It's more like how did the tension or how did the flow happen? So it's simpler than the five act structure. So it is often applied to shorter works or single movements within a larger narrative. While the five act structure is more structured and act specific, making it suited for longer works with multiple subplots or character arcs. So five act structure is more applicable to theater screenplays, while the Freytag's pyramid are more applicable to one sitting kind of reading, like short stories and all that. So, yeah, if you're trying to write a short story or a short narrative, the Freytag pyramid is a good structure to follow. But when you want to write in for screenplay, for plays and all that, and yes, novels, you can put your action-packed uh structure into the five act structure, because I think the Freytag's pyramid is a little bit of a tension driven or a flow driven kind of structure, while the five act structure is more like an action driven kind of a structure. Next, we have in our list is the 7 point story structure. So let's remember we have the hook, the plot turn one, it's followed by the pinch point one, and then in the middle is the midpoint one, the midpoint, and then followed by the pinch point two, and then the plot turn two until such time that the resolution happens. Okay, so this is the streamlined approach of the 7 act structure. So the hook grabs the attention of the reader or the audience, and the hook leads to the first plot point, wherein the first big shift is shown, and it leads to the pinch one or the first pinch, wherein the pressure mounts until such time that the character reaches the game changer event, which now becomes the midpoint. And then after the midpoint, there's a loss or a worse pressure that happens that now becomes your pinch two. So the midpoint, the game changer, is leading the main character in a more sophisticated or more complicated kind of obstacle or pain or emotional drama until this part leads to the second plot point or the final push toward resolution until, yes, the last part, which is the resolution, wherein the author will wrap up the story. So we have an example here wherein, well, you remember Katniss Everdeen in the Hunger Games? So the hook started this way. The author described Katniss as a resourceful teenager, was shown in her way of life. She is a hunter. She uses a crossbow to hunt deer, and she had a friend in a story, and she's struggling to provide for her family in a dystopian society. And next to that is um Katniss Everdeen volunteered for the Hunger Games because in their dystopian society, we have what they call the Hunger Games, wherein there is a champion in every district where they're living, and one of the champions or all of the champions from all the districts will have a contest and all that. So yes, Katniss Everdeen volunteers for the Hunger Games to save her sister, thereby leaving her ordinary world. That's your first plot turn. Next is the pinch point one. So here comes the drama, something that's gonna be painful. So not painful necessarily, but kind of dramatic that will lead the the structure or the plot to the midpoint. Yes, the game changer. So before the games began, Katniss meets other contestants and the showrunners, which raises the stakes. So she was able to see, these are the people who am I gonna fight against. So that's first pinch point. And next to that is the game changer, the midpoint. So during the games, Rue, who became her friend in the story, is killed, prompting her to stop following the rules laid out by the antagonist. So Rue is a character there that changed everything for Katniss Everdeen because she was very innocent. She was a child. She was like 12 years old, I guess. And her only defense was her innocence, her hiding, because she doesn't know how to fight. She came from a district like Katniss Everdeen who are known to be silent or yeah to lose in every game. Yes, and they don't have defense mechanism in order for them to survive in the Hunger Games, and they stayed there, and then here comes Rue, who changed the mindset of Katniss in the story. Next is the second pinch point for her. After the midpoint, Katniss hits rock bottom and she realizes that the Capitol has tricked her, making her situation seem hopeless. And this event led to second plot turn, which wherein Katniss devises a plan to outsmart the game makers, pretending to fall for Peeta, asserting her agency, and moving toward resolving the conflict. And yes, the resolution happened, where the showrunners concede to Katniss' defiance, and she emerges victorious. They let her and Peeta live, and she returns home to a better life for her family. That's just the book one of The Hunger Games. So this kind of structure is best for fast-paced, plot-heavy stories. And this is very common in young adult literature because it's more like, yeah, there's a uh what you call this, a rolling of all adventurous activities for the protagonist and the antagonist to keep the ball rolling for everybody, especially the audience in the young adult generation. And next, we have the hero's journey, which follows a circular narrative. So the journey starts with the ordinary world and then the crossing to the unknown world. So the second is the call to adventure. So something happens that would push the protagonist to adventure, and then on his or her way to get out of the unknown to the unknown world, he or she meets the mentor, and then the ordeal or ordeals come in until they return with the elixir or the reward of the journey. So we have an example here. The ordinary world um, was presented by J.K. Rowling in her in her novel Harry Potter, the book one, the first book, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone or the Sorcerer's Stone, wherein Harry was described in the story as somebody who lived with his aunt Petunia and his uncle Vernon, and he didn't live a comfortable life. And then he received a letter from Hogwarts inviting him to be a student in Hogwarts, and that's the call to adventure. Next is the meeting of the mentor. Yes, Harry meets Hagrid, who became a very good friend of his, and Hermione's and Ronald Weasley, and of course, the greatest professor in Hogwarts, Professor Dumbledore, Albus Dumbledore. And then after that, he faced his first dark arts teacher, defense against the dark arts teacher, Professor Quirrell, who was an accomplice of Voldemort, and they had an ordeal. Harry confronted Professor Quirrell, and after that, he emerged victorious and he returned a changed person from the first time he was described by the author J.K. Rowling. So that's the part where he returned with the reward, returned with the elixir. So here's a diagram of the hero's journey chart. Oh, yes, the hero's journey. Okay, so if we can see here, there's a divide between the normal world and the unknown world. So there are a lot of things, if you can observe here, there are a lot of things that are supposed to happen while the hero is discovering the unknown world. So from the normal world, he starts with a call to adventure, and then he meets his mentor, and then there's a crossing to the threshold, and then after the crossing there he meets his helper. There are trials and failure. He meets his helper there, and then there is growth wherein new skills are discovered, and then new trials again, which led to death and rebirth. So this is one of the most complicated ones for writers to write actually when they are following this kind of structure, because it has to be the event during the death and the rebirth has to be super complicated, super sophisticated, that there is a big shift or a big transition from being this at the start of the journey until this person. So this person after the rebirth should be really not totally far from the person who started the journey, but there's a change and it should be visible or shown in the story. And then there's revelation, new revelation, and finally changes are seen. And then there's atonement, and then gets the gift or the reward, and then the return changed sorry, he plans his return as a changed person and then goes back to the normal world. Yes, the end. So this happens in the story The Lord of the Rings, I guess, if you're familiar with that, in The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey by J.R.R. Tolkien. So this kind of hero's journey is more common and best for mythic or character-driven quests. So we have Pirates of the Caribbean, Percy Jackson and the Olympians. We also have Harry Potter, yes. Uh, we also have, well, the Marvel heroes, our anime stories. They're mythic and character-driven quests, sorry. So it follows the hero's journey structure. Then we also have the in media res. Then we also have the in media res, or literally Latin for in the middle of something or anything, or of a thing. So in media res starts in the middle. So you can see here the beginning of the story starts in the midst of action. Example of this is in the story The Odyssey, wherein the story begins with Odysseus as a captive. Yes. And then Odysseus uh, resumes to giving flashbacks of his quests. So the past events were revealed to provide context of what happened, why Odysseus was there. So Odysseus recounted his travels. Those are the flashbacks. And then after that, after all the flashbacks happened, and then the story reaches wherein why he was captured, the rising action begins, wherein the conflict intensifies as the story progresses. So this is when Odysseus's journey started. Odysseus' journey home started. After that, the climax is achieved, wherein the peak of the conflict was seen, wherein Odysseus had a battle with the suitors, and until the resolution happens, wherein the resolving of the conflict and the restoring of order uh, are eventually achieved. And in the example that we have, Odysseus claims his kingdom. So in media res, if you're going to see in the diagram, the story starts in the middle, and if you can see here in the light pink dots, actually they are also um what do you call this? They're also points for starting. Yeah, there are also points for starting the story that's following the in media res. Okay, so and then we have the climax. Okay, and then the resolution, or the falling action, the resolution, and the denouement. Yes, yeah. So sometimes the flashbacks happen in the light pink dots. Okay, the inciting incident is recalled, then moves again to the climax, and then moves down again until such time that the denouement is reached and the resolution. So the immediate rest is best for hooking readers for fast, uh, or for hooking readers fast and keeping the momentum. So yeah. So it keeps the audience thinking, oh, what really happened? So it's very common now in our postmodern era, in our postmodern type of storytelling, and also in our novels today. It's very common. We have the Fichtean curve next to our list. We now have the Fichtean curve. So if you can see here, you have so many crises that happen, and it starts with fast tension, and then a crisis happens. Another crisis happens, and then worsening problems. And out of the worsening problems, a more sophisticated kind of crisis happens, followed by another crisis, until such time that the most sophisticated kind of crisis is there, which is the climax. And it's like the point of no return for the main character. And then there's fast uh resolution of the story. So this kind of structure is very common on survival stories like The Martian. So it's more like a series of crises, and a very very familiar with authors who write survival stories like The Martian. We also have Sandra Bullock's movie Gravity. We also have Blake Lively's The Shallows. Yeah, their survival stories. Castaway, by who's that? Tom Hanks. Yeah. it's very complicated for an author to write survival stories because it's problem solving, and you have to make sure that the next crisis is more complicated, and it's like kind of a torture for it's kind of, yes, a kind of a torture for the main character in the story. So, yes, the author should be masters of torture, should be sophisticated enough. The next activities or the next events should be sophisticated enough to be more painful for the main character. So, it is best for tension-driven plots with little downtime. So you can see the energy for survival stories are high. So the audience are like, hey, what's gonna happen in the next? So we're already expecting that, hey, it's gonna get worse. Yes, horror stories are also like that. Yeah. Final Destination. Um, uh, there's another one. Final Destination, Wrong Turn. Yes. It's like the audience and the readers are asking the question, how could this be even worse? You know? Yeah, and they were able to pull it off. That they were able to, the main characters were able to experience worsening kind of events. Yes. So, yeah, the Fichtean curve. We have another example, The Wizard of Oz. So, we have here the rising action crisis. The first one was a tornado sweeps Dorothy over the rainbow. And then it was followed by when the Wicked Witch of the West threatened her. And then another crisis happened wherein she meets the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion. All of them have their own needs, so they were a mess. They were walking together with their own messes in their heads. Dorothy who is lost, the lion who is big and cannot trust himself to be brave, and then the Tin Man, and then the Scarecrow. Yes, and then the rising action crisis happens next was the Wicked Witch slows them down. And then another crisis happens. The Wizard of Oz needs the broom of the Wicked Witch, the Wicked Witch before he can help. And then the next one was that the flying monkeys captured Dorothy and took her to the witch until such time that they reached the climax wherein Dorothy and her companions melted the witch until Dorothy and her friends all get what they were searching for. They met the Wizard of Oz, and Dorothy got to go home. Yes, and then we have the montage, a series of short scenes. So this also one of the most common type of structure that our movies are following nowadays. So it starts with the component of a series of short scenes. So it is done by directors or authors to condense time. Yeah, to not to narrate all childhood and all that. So what happens is that there's the condensing of time by a series of short scenes to explore a theme or something. For example, in the movie Up, Carl and Ellie's life together was uh what do you call this? Um shown to us through a montage or a series of short scenes. And then there's training and relationship development or a societal change, like in Rocky, or yes, in his training montage. So he was able to, yeah, the author was able, or the director was able to show us his training montage or his transition or succession of his trainings. Yeah, just to show that he developed as a person, as a boxer. And then, yes, emotional impact montage. And this is often set to music. Example, in The Social Network, in the as the Facebook company rose in the story or in the movie, it was shown through montage in order to achieve an emotional impact. And of course, yes, to show climax and resolution, Rocky had the final fight, and Rocky uh lasted in all rounds. So what was used there in the structure was montage or a series of short scenes. And we also have other plot structures which are less common, yes, but all the same, similarly powerful and similarly useful. We have the flipped pyramid, wherein it starts with a climax and works backward, like when in the story Memento. We also have the parallel plots, like you have parallel universes. Yes, there are two or more plots that run simultaneously, like in A Tale of Two Cities. And there are also episodic plots or a series of loosely connected events, like in the movie Forrest Gump. Yes, and what are our top options for short stories? So authors and writers, oh yes, writers alike, advise the newbies to experiment on the three-act structure, the Freytag's pyramid, in medias res, and the Fichtean curve, because they are fun to experiment with and they are fun to work on and experiment and try on for character development and also for event or plot development. Okay, so what are the common mistakes in plot structure? So when you are writing your plot or your story, you have to be wary. Not worry, but be cautious of the following: the Deus ex machina, or the improbable resolution. So have you ever had, or have you ever watched or read a story wherein there is a conflict and all, and then what happens is that it's as if the conflict was unsolvable, and here comes another object, another character, or an event that just, yeah, wiped everything off and made everything better. Yeah, that is what you call an improbable resolution, a rapid or improbable kind of resolution. And we have memes about this. Like, we are expecting so big. We're expecting a kind of a big resolution for the Game of Thrones. But we didn't, yeah, I don't know. Well, the memes are speaking for itself, for themselves, that the the resolution was so improbable, or yeah, it's just, I don't know, rapid. Yeah, something just happened and yeah, it was resolved. The story was resolved. The story was ended. That is what you call a deus ex machina. Okay, a resolution that's improbable. Of course, be careful with inconsistencies and gaps. Sometimes characters hold the gaps. Sometimes an author will show a character and then will not build the character and will just leave the character hanging. So that's a character gap. Sometimes an inconsistency happen. There's a character inconsistency. Sometimes there's a decision there's a change of attitude and it's not logical. So that is what you call a plot hole. Another is a lack of pacing. Yeah, so too slow or too fast. So you have to be careful with that as well. So the decision of the author to be slow and fast should be timely, because there are certain events wherein you should go fast, but there are also certain events that you should go slow. And especially if these events are very important in shaping the structure or the plot structure or the character. So, all in all, we have to craft compelling stories and we have to understand plot structures in order to enhance our storytelling. So, we have to know what happens after this event happens, what is predictable, what is unpredictable, because it's also important that we can go the extra mile in discovering what is predictable and then doing something or writing something that is unexpected. That's another talent, or that is another gift. And each structure offers unique strengths. So in your experimentation of writing different kinds of structures or different kinds of plots, it is important to know or to be sensitive of the strengths of these kinds of story of structures, and um, actually use the strengths that they offer so that the story can be more impactful and can be more remarkable and would leave um, a haunting effect, I guess, a haunting effect for the audience or the readers. Yes. And well, the third important thing, you have to experiment on various structures. As a writer, you are called to experiment not just on developing your character, but also in developing plot structures. It is important that we don't just experiment, we read about different structures, we read the application of structures in different stories. That's why in my classes, I always encourage my students, hey, you watch this movie, you read stories by uh, different authors, and we actually have author studies in order for us to have um an a little bit of a knowledge of the styles of writing when it comes to plot development by different authors around the world. And that's all for plot structure. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I hope to see you in my next content. Stay with me because I will be uploading a lot of educational videos for you as a teacher, as a left taker, or someone who just wants to improve their skills and abilities in writing and also language stuff. So don't forget to follow, don't forget to share, and don't forget to subscribe. See ya!